a very awaited session, and it will be a very great learning for you all. So, a very good evening to one and all present here, respected our convener, participants, and our chief guest of the day, Prem Prakash Meena sir. I, Shiva Pamar, President of the NISTHA, the Civil Service Society of Hansraj College, welcomes everyone to the second day of our jubilant event called Aram, which can be attributed to the meaning of beginning. Nishtha, a society which was founded in year 2017, has been on front line in providing aspirant a platform where they get an edge over other students. Nishtha, a foremost civil service society of Delhi University, is helping students to get over personal dilemmas which they faces during their preparation. From discussing the preparation strategy to organize discussions on very complex ethical issue, Nishtha Society has been turned out to be a very phenomenal one. Keeping in mind the complexity and the rigidness of several current events, we have invited Mr. Prem Prakash Meena sir to throw a light on a very episodic topic, that is challenges in democracy. Sir, I welcome you, and it's been a pleasure for us that you are here with us. A very welcome to sir.
Well, thank you so much, Shiva. I truly appreciate it. And I'd like to basically say a very good evening to all the attendees of this session. And once again, I'd like to congratulate the entire team of NISTHA to start this initiative, as you said, in 2017, wherein like-minded people could come together and sort of, I would say, put their energies together to clarify, organize the sessions, and interact with persons of interest, I would say. So I'll basically kick off with that. Thanks everyone for taking the time and giving me the opportunity to put forward my thoughts around the topic of the day. And the topic of the day is basically the challenges which are being faced by the Indian bureaucracy.
Yes, sir.
So I think the format of the discussion could be, we could take about, let's say, 10 to 12 minutes initially to give an idea about what I think or what has been my perspective and experience over last year and a half being a part of the Indian Administrative Services. And then after that, I think we can actually basically open up to take questions as people might have in their mind. And I'll try and basically keep the session more of an interactive one rather than a one-sided monologue. So let me start with or let me introduce myself. Well, I'm Prem Prakash Meena. I'm currently posted as Joint Magistrate or SDM Hathras, one of the districts in Uttar Pradesh. It was recently in news for a number of reasons. I don't think I need to really explain about that much. Before joining civil services, I worked abroad in oil and gas industry for a number of years. I have worked with companies such as Schlumberger, Shell, British Petroleum, in about 6 different countries, and I visited more than 22. And then things did happen in life, which actually made me change course of my career and switching from a private sector job to an Indian Administrative Services. So that's me. I'm 2018 batch. This is my second posting. I was posted in a district called Basti, which is quite close to a district called Gorakhpur. Gorakhpur, you might have all heard, or Ayodhya. It's kind of like in the middle of when you travel from Ayodhya to Gorakhpur, that's where Basti is. So that was my first posting. That's where I got myself trained. And once I completed my training in August 2020, I got posted to Hathras. And then Hathras happened. So I think that also gave me plenty full of opportunities to get better understanding of what those true challenges could be when you actually are posted in field. And of course, you do get some exposure around what your job is like when you are posted in office or in Sachivalaya or in policy making. So I'll try and cover basically all of those aspects or all of those colors of a civil servant. So I think to me, based on what I've seen during right from my preparation days to my training days as an IAS to my field posting, to me, the first big challenge is around the recruitment of choosing the right kind of people for this job. And I do see that as a challenge because we have a very singular form of entrance examination for the higher bureaucracy, I would say, which is the IAS, the IPS, the IFS, the IRS, the IRTS. And the job profile of those jobs are quite different. For example, the job profile of an IAS is more of a generalist. IPS is dedicated to the police services. IRS IT is to the income tax. Similarly, you got IRS customs, excise and customs, which is dedicated to excise and customs, of course. And then you got IRTS, which is basically dealing with the Indian Railways. Then you have people who take care of the defense state. Then you have people who take care of the audit and accounts. And there are a number of other services as well. So having a singular exam to recruit people for such a wide variety of jobs is in itself is very interesting. And to me, I don't think I've seen any other country or any other system wherein a single examination is basically utilized to recruit people for a wide variety of jobs. For example, if you are appearing for MBBS, you sit through, it used to be CPMT back days. Now it's called NEET, but that's a very specific technical exam. If you want to appear for engineering, then you basically go through IIT JEE or AIEEE. But that is only for one specialized stream, which you are going to then basically go read for next 4 years, 5 years. But I think to me, the first challenge is what kind of recruitment process would you design so that it actually can cater to such a wide range of jobs? And when you appear for the exam, you yourself is not even aware which service you are going to get, which cadre you are going to get. So the examination has to be very generic. And once you pass through that examination, then you get allotted different services and then different cadres. And then that's when you know, oh, okay, so now I got into police services. So I did get through a very generalized examination system, but now I need to start specializing myself into a specific sector. So to me, recruitment is an exam. And then there are challenges around what should be the right age bracket for recruitment. There are debates on both sides. There are people who believe that younger the better. There are people who believe that more experience the better. As far as I am concerned, I am of the opinion that I think people should have prior work experience before they appear for civil services. And I can speak from my own experience because the kind of the job you get into once you get into civil services is such that you do need some operation experience, some field experience, some kind of prior job experience before you get posted as, for example, let's say in IAS, you get posted as an SDM or a BDO or a joint magistrate, and a year later you get posted as a chief development officer, like they do in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And these jobs include a lot of interaction with common people. These jobs include a lot of interaction with the public representatives, the political executive. These jobs include a lot of interaction with the judiciary, with the police, with multiple different other departments. So my view is if you have gained some experience before you get into such, I would say, such jobs, I think that comes very handy. Your people skill come very handy. Your emotional intelligence you develop over the course of that experience comes very handy. And then your ability to manage some of those complex situations comes very handy. The sensitivity which comes also comes very handy when you discharge these jobs. So to me, it's like, what should be the right age bracket? What should be the right background? What should be the right examination? To me, is the first challenge when it comes to the challenges being faced by the Indian bureaucracy. The second part is, I would say, once you get recruited, you get assigned to a particular service, and then you get assigned to a particular cadre. Your cadre could be any of the states or the union territories, depending on the service you get assigned to. Similarly, for services like Indian Foreign Service, Indian Forest Service, and income tax, IRS IT, customs, you could be posted anywhere across the country. And if it's Indian Foreign Service, of course, you'll be posted majority of your life abroad. So the second part is, once you get assigned to a particular service, a cadre, then what kind of training makes sense? Now, in my first attempt, I got recruited as Assistant Commissioner Income Tax. My first attempt, I got into IRS IT, and I got trained for about 6 months at National Academy of Direct Taxes, Nagpur. And during the course of the training, the training was about 1.5 years long. Now, having come from, having worked with a number of large world-class corporate sectors, to me, I found that training not necessarily all of it relevant to the job, not necessarily the right kind of duration. So I found that you're spending about roughly 18 months being trained into taxation code. To me, it did not make much sense. I was of the belief that it could be shortened, it could be sharpened, it could be made more field oriented. So I think the training is also a challenge. Similarly, in my second subsequent attempt, when I got into a proper IAS, during my training at Labasna, Masuri, which is actually the IAS training academy, I had similar kind of questions. Is like the kind of job I'm going to get into, is the training actually imparting the right kind of skill sets I need to discharge my job? Or is it giving the right kind of exposure I need once I get into the field operations? And my take on that is not always, not necessarily. There is a significant gap between what the field conditions might require compared to what some of these trainings actually has to offer. And it's always tough. It's always tough. For example, specialized services, I think it's much easier. For example, you get into IRS IT, you know this is the tax code, and you have to specialize in it. You have to specialize in taxation code, international taxation, etc., etc. But if you get into more generalized services, for example, IAS, you cannot actually design and devise any training course which actually can cater to all of those situations which you might be facing once you get into field. It can give you some indication of how the government structures are set up, what the hierarchies are, and some of those very, very basic instruments which you potentially could utilize when a situation arises. But no training can be sufficient, and no training can be tailored to meet every field specific situation. For example, you might have watched Hathras incident on TV for about a week or two, and the situations were extremely dynamic. They were evolving all the time. And just imagine, could you, as a training director or a training academy chief, devise a training program to train your basically officers to cater to such a situation? And my answer to that is absolutely no. But what you can do is basically select right kind of experienced people with the right EQ, right level of sensitivity, and basically give them initial foundation so that they exactly know when to respond, how to respond, who to talk to, who to connect with, and how to basically arrive at certain decisions during such dynamic conditions. So to me, training itself is quite an interesting part. Similar is the case with, I would say, training of the IPS, the police cadre. So I have a lot of friends, my batchmates. When we talk to them, I think a lot of focus is on the physical activity in police services. But when you really look at their daily job is not to actually run and climb mountains or to do a marathon every morning. The job is actually be sensitive, listen to people, what their problems are, be technically extremely competent. Today, policing is actually evolving into a much complex arena when it comes to newer fields such as cyber crimes, more high-profile crimes in the bigger cities, etc., etc. So I think more than the physical activity, what it needs is ability to understand complex situations, ability to solve those complex situations, ability to stay tech savvy. So to me, the training not always basically is in parlance with what your field requirements are. So recruitment, training, and the third one is deployment. Deployment is always a challenge. For example, I think when we are all preparing for UPSC, and even after that, we hear a lot of stories around who gets posted where. So the deployment may not always sound rational or need-based or competence-based. A lot of factors play into it, and it might have to do with what the government basically wants at that place, at that particular time, what kind of skills do they want, what kind of person do they want, what their priorities are, etc., etc. So you could always see a little bit of overlap and disconnect between what should be there compared to what actually gets posted or how the human resources are deployed. The third one is appraisal. So once you get basically posted, then appraisal process, I would say across the entire spectrum of bureaucracy, is yet to evolve into a more dynamic 21st century type. So having worked for private sector for quite significant length of duration, and when I compare with that appraisal system to what we have right now in bureaucracy, I think there's a huge gap there. So here, but I'll also have to say, when you're working for corporate, private sector, etc., the priorities are very different compared to when you basically work as a bureaucrat. So, it's much easier to say that why don't you have similar kind of appraisal systems for the bureaucracy as well? But in reality, because your priorities are so very different, the situations are very different, the requirements are very different, the deliverables are very different. So it's very difficult to basically simply extrapolate similar kind of appraisal systems to the government one. There have been a number of steps which have been taken, particularly after the second ARC reforms in 2008. And the appraisal system has started to evolve into a more competitive, more, I would say, outcome-based or delivery-based appraisal system. But I think it still has a long way to go before we can actually call it, before it can truly start to cater to the 21st century requirements. Another big challenge is the tenure of people who get posted. So I think this has been a major debate since 1980s particularly. The courts have also intervened about what should be the tenure of bureaucrats once they get posted. And I think there are both sides to it. I mean, there are a lot of people who want a fixed tenure for the bureaucracy. And there are people who are of the opinion that because the system is so dynamic, you cannot actually, or it may not be actually even healthy to give an absolute fixed tenure to the bureaucracy, simply because of the fact when you know that I am indispensable in the way that I won't be shifted before I complete my 2 years in my seat, I may actually become very complacent. I may become very complacent, and I may say कि I like to use a bit of Hindi here. काम करूं ना करूं 2 साल तो रहना ही, right? So that is one part of it. The other part could be, I could get removed, at the whims and fancies of the higher ups or the political executive. So I need to basically do what they ask me to do. So there's always this dilemma, what the fine line is. And I think we as a bureaucracy, we as a country are yet to arrive at what could be that fine balance. There have been recommendations about establishment of police boards. I think the Prakash Meena committee, who basically rightly took it to the Supreme Court also passed orders. I think it was in 2006. But those police reforms had not necessarily been implemented in all the states in its entirety. But they also suggested that DGP should have a fixed tenure of at least 2 years, so that when he gets into the seat, he exactly knows that under general circumstances, I'll not be removed from my seat unless something big happens, so that he can actually deliver on his job impartially. But at the same time, this is also possible that he could, once you are very sure of your tenure, then you could basically stop listening to people. You could stop listening to political executive. You could stop listening to your subordinate. And you could basically start to do your own thing in a way. So that is also a big part of the challenge. What should be the right tenure balance? The next one is, I think, which is, I would say, favorite for majority of us is how to basically work with political executives, how to work with public representatives. And I would say this is unfortunate for the country that when it comes to the general image, is that bureaucracy and political executive in general finds it difficult to basically align themselves and work in tandem. My experience has been very different. I'll be very honest. And I'm not sugarcoating anything here, but my experience of 1.5 years and having worked with a number of political executives of different statures in 2 different districts. One was Eastern UP and another one is now Western UP. I have found that if you are willing and forthcoming to work in tandem with the political executive, in 99% of the cases, there's always a way out to find a balance. See, the structure is very simple. And I think this is one of the issues bureaucracy starts to basically find itself at loggerheads with political executive. The political executive will have to go and get himself or herself re-elected every 5 years. So they have their set of priorities. And those priorities may not necessarily be aligned with your priorities all the time. And that's where you have to basically understand their viewpoint as well. As if somebody is basically asking you to do something in a specific fashion, why he might be asking you to do that. And in majority of the cases, what I've experienced is, if you do not agree with their viewpoint, either with what they're asking you to do or the way they are asking you to do, if you sit with them and explain to them the legal position and the window which is available to basically maneuver a solution to that problem, in 99% of the cases, they will generally understand. Guys, I got a phone call. I'll have to just put it on hold for a minute and excuse.
Okay, the sir is on hold. He will be back in 1 minute or so. So please be patient, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, sorry guys. So I think that's the nature of the job. You never know what might happen in the district. So just coming back to the topic of discussion, which is how do you align yourself or how do you work in synergy with public representatives? My experience has been quite positive, I would say. In 99% of the cases, once you basically sit down with them. So what is the expectation of a political executive? The expectation of a political executive is that he should be given the respect he deserves. And I think we should. At the same time, that his legitimate demand should be heard and he should be seen respected in public. And I would say three of these demands in no way are illegitimate. I mean, because he is a representative political executive, protocol wise also, if you look at the Gazette of India, a political executive sits much higher than even the district collector. So if a political executive approaches you and you just basically offer him a proper seat, you give him dedicated time to hear out his issues, you basically have a good look at what he's asking you to do. And if there are areas which are doable, straightforward, offer a solution to them. If there are areas wherein you think actually they are not legally possible and there could be legal challenges or things could actually get complicated, explain them to him. And I can almost guarantee you that 99% of the cases, they will basically understand your limitations. What I have seen is majority of the times the clashes arise when either you are not offering them the respect they expect, or you are basically not willing to listen to their legitimate demands, or in certain cases illegitimate demands. As far as the listening and the hearing part goes, you will have to listen to both types of demands. I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, he just needs 10 minutes of your time, so offer him that. I don't think that should be a big deal. And then a lot of times when you basically analyze the entire situation, we do not take the time and make the effort to make him or her understand why a part of what he wants you to do is doable and why part of what he wants you to do is not doable. So if you are not basically explaining to him, it may come across as if you are actually deliberately trying not to get his job done. And that's when the confrontation starts. So to me, I mean, I've applied it across the platform, and I'm not saying like this is sort of the panacea or this is the pill you take and then everything will get sorted all by itself. Every situation is different. People are different. The dynamics are different. The thought processes are different. But my experience has been, at least now, having worked with at least 7 different Vidhayaks, MLAs, and 3 different MPs, this formula in 99% of the cases works. Give them time, give them a patient hearing, explain to them, and they'll understand. So I think this is a big part, political executive. And also understand, I think this is one I have seen in a number of people. I think this is one of the wrong notions bureaucracy starts to develop, that actually it is us who runs the country. No, bureaucracy can never be the one to run the country. It has to be the political executive. The constitution is very, very clear. The bureaucracy is there to support the political executive. As long as that concept is clear, I would say 50% of that confrontation attitude will just go away. A lot of people think I am the district magistrate, I am the district collector, so the district has to be run as the whims and fancies of me. No, absolutely not. You are there to ensure that the legitimate orders of the courts, the government orders, the acts, they are being followed in letter and spirit. But your job is also to ensure that the legitimate demands and works which are being brought by the public representatives are also being taken care of. Because if you are not going to get those works done, the political executive will have nothing to show to his or her voters. And then what will he go with 4 years later to ask for votes? So if he is not going to get work done through you, then who else? Then he is going to basically pick up a confrontation situation with you, because otherwise he is running out of time. You might think I am here for the next 35 years, right? Once you get into services, you are there almost for a fixed 30, 35 years, or some cases 37, whatever the age bracket might be. But for him, he does not have 35 years. For him, it is the next 3 years. After that, the electoral process kicks in. And then he'll have to basically go back to his voters and tell them, this is all the work which I have gotten done for you. If he'll go empty plate, then his entire political career is at stake. So try and understand his compulsions. And that's why he might be in a hurry, wherein you might think, no, I mean, to me, this is a very regular affair. I'll take my own sweet time. And I'll see you in a month's time. 1 महीने बाद आइए, तब मैं इसके बारे में कुछ सोच के बताता हूँ. जैसे कि मैं आपके पास आया हूँ, I basically gotten here with my problem. At least let me know in next 2, 3, 4, 5 days what can be done about it. If not 100%, maybe 50%, 60%, 70%, but at least give me something. As long as you're offering, okay, 60% of it's doable, 40% is not because of this and all. Maybe we can do that 6 months later or a year later or 2 months later. He'll be fine. At least he'll have something to get started with. So these are, I would say, people management skill, interpersonal skills, emotional quotient, whatever you call it. But I think to me, I think that has worked brilliantly well, and it has worked brilliantly well in the state of Uttar Pradesh. So you can imagine it should most likely work in other states. The next one is detachment for public. So that's a huge issue. I mean, I have experienced it myself. When you get into services, you basically read all those nice fancy books like Lakshmi Kant and ethics paper and whatnot. And when you are basically preparing for UPSC, you read Hindu, Indian Express, and whichever your favorite brand of newspaper or magazine is. And you are very clear. This is right, this is wrong. This is right, this is wrong. This is black, this is white. There's no gray. But when you get into the actual job, 99% of it is gray. Not always 100% is black and white. And that's where most people get disillusioned, confused about, यार किताब में तो ये पढ़ के आया था कि गलत है, सही है. भाई किताब यूपीएससी तक ठीक थी, but now get into reality. And don't lose, for example, let's say there's a situation, right? And you have a particular rule. If you go absolutely strictly by the rule all the time, you might not be able to do anything about it. But if you say, well, if you interpret the rule, creative interpretation of the rule, or working with different stakeholders, in majority of the cases, you are basically able to find ways and means and workarounds which might enable you to achieve at least, let's say, 70% of what you want to achieve. So take that 70%. Don't lose entire 100% for that last 30%. Okay, like Jack Welch used to have this 80-20 theory, which to me, I think even in private sector and in the government sector works brilliantly well for me. So as long as you manage to get 80%, take it. So let's say you want to build a road, like for example, for my Nyay Panchayat, which is a combination of about 12 different villages. And I say, well, if I go by this policy, I cannot deliver it for all the 12. But I say, well, I can basically work around it, and I can do a creative interpretation, pool resources from different areas and all that, and I can build it for 7. So I cannot say कि जब तक 12 का पूरा नहीं होगा मैं कभी नहीं बनाऊंगा. अरे मुझे 7 का मिल रहा है, मैं 7 का बनाता हूँ. अगली बार फिर कुछ और जुगाड़ सोचेंगे इसके बारे में. ठीक है. So be positive. And you'll always find a way. But it also happens that when you basically get into service, I think this monologue is getting stretched a little long, but just bear with me another maybe 10 minutes.
Sure, sir.
The detachment kicks in. When I say detachment, when you get into the service initially, you're very passionate. Very passionate. People queue outside your room. Oh, direct IAS आया है तो बात सुनेगा, कुछ करेगा. You also go there with a lot of zeal and all that. And then initially, जो भी problem आएगी, you'll look at it very meticulously. You'll basically ensure that work gets done. A few months into your job, it becomes very routine for you. ठीक है? For the person who is approaching you, you are the only ray of hope he or she got. That's why he has approached you. For you, he could be, one of those 200 people who queue outside your office every morning. So when you get into office, when you get a few months into your job, फिर ऐसा लगता है अरे ये तो डेली का यही है. So that feeling, that mechanical approach and insensitivity towards people start to set in fairly quickly. Initially, तो you are very 10 बजे जाओगे sharp, you are there, you are sitting, you are listening, everybody is very happy. और ये नए साहब आए हैं, बहुत बढ़िया सुनते हैं. 3 महीने के बाद तुम्हें लगता है यार रोज रोज जाता हूँ, वही शिकायतें, किसी की नाली की प्रॉब्लम, किसी के खड़ंजे की प्रॉब्लम, किसी की सड़क की प्रॉब्लम, किसी के माँ बाप ने उसको निकाल दिया है, किसी को माँ बाप ने निकाल दिया है, मतलब किसी ने माँ बाप को निकाल दिया है, किसी के स्कूल में, मतलब सेम सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स, राइट? जैसे डॉक्टर होता है, सर्जन, ही डज ऑल दी सर्जरीज एंड ऑल दैट. So it becomes very mechanical, like police becomes very mechanical. Every day and night they see dead bodies. ये accident हो गया. Like when I was posted in Basti, I had 11 thanas under me. So 3 of my thanas were on the main expressway. And it was a very routine job. Every night there'll be 4 to 5 accidents and about, 7 or 8 people will die almost every night. Almost every night. So when I got posted there, initially I was very shocked. My God, 8 people are basically getting dead. It's a large number. If you stack it up, it's about 220, 240, dead bodies every month. If you basically extrapolate that to a full year, it's almost 2,500 roughly. That's a ballpark. Huge number. But 3-4 months later, it became such a routine phone call. साहब, एम्बुलेंस लेके आए हैं, यहाँ पे ट्रॉली पलट गई, यहाँ ट्रक ने इधर भिड़ा दिया, यहाँ जीप ने भिड़ा दिया. For police and administration, it becomes a very usual affair. Once in a while they used to be scared, अरे डेड बॉडी नहीं हटाने देंगे जब तक SDM नहीं आएगा या तो compensation नहीं मिलेगा. Then it used to become a special event. So the reason basically I am giving you all this gyan in kahani is the fact that this is one of the biggest challenges the bureaucracy faces. Initially, there is a very short period of high level of sensitivity, and then it starts to plateau, and then you start to get detached from it. I know a lot of my batchmates who feel, my God, ये SDM की नौकरी तो इतनी demanding है, सुबह से शाम तक कोई ना कोई प्रॉब्लम आती रहती है. किसी का पानी बंद हो गया, किसी को राशन नहीं मिल रहा है, किसी की लाइट नहीं आ रही, किसी के स्कूल में एडमिशन नहीं हो रहा है, कहीं पे एक्सीडेंट हो गया, कहीं पे लॉ एंड ऑर्डर हो गया. यार, we don't have any life. So when you basically get a phone call कि साहब मेरे साथ तो बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो गया, please do something about it, you hate that phone call. अरे यार क्या, अभी तो बस मैं बैठा ही था खाना खाने, अभी तो मैं सोने ही जा रहा था, अभी तो मैं खेल ही रहा था बच्चों, मतलब whatever you're doing. So that is a huge issue. How do you contain that sense of detachment? How do you keep yourself passionate about the fact that you might have hundreds of those people who are queued outside your job office every morning. So for you, it might be a very routine thing. But for the person who is queued outside your office, for him, his case, and you are very, very special. If you are not going to basically give him or her a patient hearing and not solve his or her problem, then he will have probably no other place to go. And coming back to the previous point, why do people start to approach political executives? They start to approach political executives only when people like us who get posted as bureaucrats, they stop catering to their issues and become insensitive. फिर वो जाएगा, फिर विधायक जी से, मंत्री जी से, सांसद जी से, उनसे फोन करवाएगा, क्योंकि आप तो सुन नहीं रहे हो, आपके लिए तो डेली जॉब हो गया है वो, तो वहां से फोन करवाएगा तब शायद आप सुनो. But this has been my practical experience over last 1.5 years. If you can devise ways and means to stay connected with people, go do field visits, उनकी प्रॉब्लम्स को आप प्रॉपर्ली सुनिए, टाइम बाउंड मैनर में सॉल्व करिए, कोई जाएगा ही नहीं कहीं. You will not create that vacuum which needs to be filled by somebody else. So if somebody is interfering in your basically job, particularly the political executive, as far as I am concerned, my experience has been it is of your own making. Because you have stopped doing your job properly. That's why you created that vacuum in space, which then gets occupied by somebody else. So don't blame them. Blame yourself. So काफी ज्ञान हो गया इस पे. The next one is shortfalls. Shortfalls, I mean, there's always an issue about the human resource crunch. Also, when it comes to infrastructural facilities, there's always an issue कि यहाँ पे ये नहीं है, table नहीं है, कुर्सी नहीं है, building पुरानी हो गई है. So that is a story which runs across the length and breadth of the bureaucracy. So I'm not going to spend time on that. The other one is dynamic landscape, the emerging ones. So Indian bureaucracy, I would say, I mean, to the senior bureaucrats, it probably may not sound very fair, but I would say I think the bureaucracy remained fairly stagnant until the 2000s. But after 2000, India as a country started to take off big time, because of the economic development, because of the changing political dynamics, because of the new class, middle class emerging, etc., new kind of challenges emerging, globalization taking over, blah, blah, blah. And because that landscape changed so significantly, the bureaucracy as such was such a rigid structure, it not necessarily managed to respond in equal measures to this changing dynamics. And if you basically, let's talk about the future is going to be even more dynamic because of all the factors I just mentioned. So I think that is a huge challenge which the bureaucracy is facing, has faced over the last 2 decades or so, and is continuing to be basically will be tested on. The next one is lateral entry and different measures which are being taken to address some of those issues. People have very, very different opinions around whether lateral entries are something which makes sense. A lot of people feel, certainly the government feels, that actually this is the right way to go. As far as I am concerned, and having stayed in US for about 2 years, I used to live in Texas for quite some time and in London. And then because of that, I watched the US elections and the system they work with very closely. To me, it makes a lot of sense to basically allow lateral entry. But it has to be a very thoughtful exercise. It should not be very just for the sake of it. For example, if you look at the US elections, the recent results got out. When the president basically comes in, he comes with his own set of about 4,000 bureaucratic executives. So the entire bureaucratic structure changes when he joins in. He gets his own team. And why should he not get his own team? Because at the end of the day, if things get done or not done, he's the one who will be held accountable for it. So he should be basically given free hand in choosing his or her own team. At the same time, for example, let's say I have joined as an IAS. This is very interesting. I have joined as an IAS, and that basically takes me to the next thing, which is generalization versus specialization. I've joined as an IAS, appeared for a very generic exam, wherein every question or every topic under the sun could be asked in the exam. Whatever comes in the newspaper, that is the syllabus of the exam. So that works well for first 2, 3, 4 years when the nature of the job is very generic. But after that, you start to head some of those departments. For example, you might be heading the municipality. You might be the municipal commissioner, for example. You might be joint secretary in Department of Finance. You might be joint secretary in Department of Transportation, Highways, Waterways, or Social Justice. So with this generic exam and generic experience in the initial years, have you really prepared yourself basically to take on those specialized jobs? This has been a huge debate, particularly for the IAS. And there have been different number of different thought processes on that. A lot of people feel that the job of an IAS is more of a people management job. As long as you know to identify right people and basically utilize those specialized right people to do the job, I think what's the need of you having to specialization in those areas? I have a very different stake on it. To me, specialization is important. Specialization is certainly important to a large extent, and maybe it worked well for first 30 years after independence. But after that, I think maybe it did not work that well. So if I'm going to basically be a part of or a secretary or principal secretary of the Ministry of Finance, do you not expect me to basically know absolute nitty-gritties of that particular department? How will I manage it otherwise? I mean, for example, you look at the US, for example, the secretary, the Treasury Secretary, he was, I think, ex JP Morgan, right? Or Goldman Sachs, I think. Similarly, the Defense Secretary, he was ex General, right? Secretary of State, he has been a lifetime career diplomat, etc., etc. So I think you basically do need specialization. So that is another huge challenge with the Indian bureaucracy is facing: generalization versus specialization. Now you cannot recruit specialized people right from the start because the initial nature of the job of an IAS is very generic. But then, as you spend about 10, 12 years into the job, then you start to get into specialized specific sectors. And then you do not stay with that sector for the rest of your bureaucratic career. It keeps changing every 5 years because you might be, let's say you might be for 6 months, you might be in the Department of Finance. After 6 months, you might get switched over to Department of Fisheries. Now, fishery has no connect with finance except a little bit. And then few months later, you might be in Department of Defense, which absolutely has no connect with what you have done over the last 12 years, including the last 2 stints as joint secretaries. So it's a very interesting debate around what kind of specialization, at what stage that specialization, the specialization should kick in. Should it be right from the start? Should it kick in mid-career, first 10 years, 12 years, 15 years? Or you should be given a choice once you're done your field stint, which is the first 16 years of an IAS. Then you should be given a choice what department you want to, or 2 or 3 different departments you want to spend rest of your career in, and then you should be specialized in that. So that I think is a huge, huge challenge. 2, 3 more quick points, which is interdepartmental coordination, always a challenge, but I wouldn't basically spend too much time on it because you all understand the nature of the job is such that you have to coordinate with different departments, and not all the time everybody will feel aligned with you. So you basically have to utilize your interpersonal skills, your coordination skills, your project management skills, kabhi puchkar ke, kabhi danda chala ke, to bring everybody on board and they basically get the job done. The next one is judicial overreach, activism, or basically having to work with the judicial constraints. Particularly over the last decade and a half, you might have heard a lot of these words like judicial overreach, etc., etc. So a lot of areas wherein they were prerogative of either the political executive or the bureaucratic executive, the judiciary has started to assert itself in those areas. So I think that is also could be a part of the challenge, as how do you basically strike that fine balance wherein you have to exercise your own rights and duties. At the same time, you also have to honor what the court suggests to you. And I would say the last part before we open the session to questions is traps of their own making. When I say traps of their own making, I think the Indian bureaucracy, particularly over last, things have started to change lately. But for majority of its things, they have they have basically thought themselves as the gods of how the system should be run. And they thought the system should basically be run as we want it to run, rather than we should basically change with the changing dynamics. And that's why a lot of corruption has crept in, has stayed in the system for so long. That's why these debates around specialization and generalization, that's why the debates around lateral entries, etc. So for a large part of last 73 years, the bureaucracy did not make enough efforts to change with changing times, to change with changing dynamics, to change with changing aspirations of people and country. And that's why, in some way, they got left behind. And because they got left behind, now they are trying to catch up with it. But because the pace of change has exponentially increased over particularly last decade and a half, they are struggling with it. They're struggling with it. I mean, they have the thought process in place, but they are not 100% sure how to basically have that implemented and which direction to choose and how to basically have that executed. So I think to me, that is another huge challenge when it comes to being faced by the Indian bureaucracy. Well, with that, I'll stop boring you more on what I had to say. And I apologize because I thought it should be first 10, 15 minutes. And I'm just looking at my watch, it's 43 minutes. So it has taken a lot more than I expected. But with that, I'll hand over to Shiva and we go from there.
Yeah. So, sir, it was very knowledgeable, and the difference between what we used to thought how bureaucracy is and how it is in reality is that much that we can easily sail the boat between that difference. So, sir, we got a bunch of questions, and I will take some of them. And sir, the first question is that how Indian bureaucracy is different from Western bureaucracy.
So the long and short of that is so Western bureaucracy is not a monolith. Like for example, when you say Western bureaucracy, American system is very different from, for example, the British system or the Dutch system. American system is very different, and actually, I'm particularly a fan of the American system for a lot of reasons. Because of the fact that their bureaucratic system is a combination of career bureaucrats along with specialization. For example, when the president comes in, he brings in his own specialized set of people. For example, if somebody has to head the Department of Finance, now, well, that's a different system, of course. It's a presidential system wherein we got basically the Council of Ministers. So we have to choose a minister from, or we have to choose a minister from for example, the elected MPs or the elected MLAs, which the president of the US president does not have to do. He can basically pick and choose whoever he or she wants to pick and choose. We do not have that liberty here. He'll have to pick basically one of them. When he could actually pick up a technocrat, which, if you look at the current, for example, I mean, it happens every now and then. The prime ministers have chosen to pick up technocrats over the elected representatives for some of the positions. You look at our foreign minister right now. He used to be foreign secretary, Mr. Jaishankar. So I would say the difference. So when I'm saying Western, the British system is not very different from the Indian system. And of course, the British, even though our system is primarily nothing but the British system, but the British then basically realizing that with changing times we need to change the system, they brought in a lot of reforms into it and have made it more dynamic, more responsive, wherein we basically did not manage to bring those changes in our system. So those systems are more based on specialization, a dynamic nature of the job, wherein the bureaucrats come or technocrats come, join as bureaucrats, work for those 4 or 5 years of the government. And once the government goes, they also go back to corporate sector. So for example, let's say I'm heading the Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. I could basically join as a Secretary of Finance or Treasury. And then I work for 4 or 5 years and then I go back to my corporate sector job. So I brought in a lot of specialization when I'm joining as a bureaucrat, wherein Indian bureaucracy is different in the sense that I start off from a very generalized career. I stay in a generalized career for so long that I have probably lost large part of my learning ability during that period. And then I get posted in very important position in a very specialized sector. And then all I'll be generally doing is, because I know pata nahi kab transfer ho jaye yahan se. So I'm not going to, basically put my heart and mind into learning the nitty gritties of it. I'll rather say कि जितने दिन हूँ बस कैसे तैसे चलता रहे हिसाब किताब. ठीक है. So then you'll basically listen and do what you are being asked to do. And also you might not be able to go into in-depth understanding of the nitty gritties of your particular department. So your managing style or management could be fairly superficial in some way. So these are 2 or 3 key differences. If I have to point that out, I'll basically say our system is not specialized. Our system is career bureaucracy based rather than come and go type or lateral entry type. And our system is still, because we are a developing country, our system is still the My Baap culture, particularly in the poorer states. For example, I would say the UP, Bihar, MP, yeah, and even the southern states, you basically name them. It's still if you got a problem, अच्छा एक आपको इनकम सर्टिफिकेट बनवाना है, आप तहसीलदार के चक्कर काटोगे, एसडीएम के चक्कर काटोगे, वहां नहीं हो आप डीएम के चक्कर काटोगे. So you're still heavily dependent upon the government for even things which you will basically otherwise expect. Yeah, this is my birthright. Why will I have to go and basically bribe somebody or 10 chakkar kaatne pade mujhe? Why will I have to do that? You don't find that in those bureaucratic setups. But hopefully, I think every country goes through these transitions, and we are in a place wherein I think we are going through the transition between maybe developed and more developing to less developed countries, and eventually those systems will basically also kick in. So I think these are two or three different differences which I have experienced myself, and I'm hoping that answers your question.
Okay, yeah, perfectly, sir. And sir, you mentioned that Indian bureaucracy is more or less same as British democracy. In fact, the model code of conduct, which is known as Achar Sanhita, it is known as Parda in UK. So yeah, it is more or less same. Sir, next question is that what is the role of media in Indian bureaucracy?
Well, yeah, last month and a half gave me a very thorough understanding of what role media can play when it comes to bureaucracy. I'll also say that the role of media. So before I basically come answer your pointed question, I have been following US elections very closely. The role of media is not very different, even in developed countries such as the United States. There, the media at times is extremely biased. There, the media also manipulates facts, figures, events to either appease their readership, to appease their base, or to get better TRP. And Indian media landscape is no different from what it is there, and actually even could be more extreme in Indian case. Now, my experience has been media does have a significant impact both on the political executive as well as the bureaucratic executive when it comes to responding to situations, when it comes to shaping people's perceptions, when it comes to disseminating information and forming opinions. For example, what you might have seen particularly, so I am speaking for myself here, but you might have seen about Hathras case. Now, I cannot divulge details, etc., but a large part of what media might have shown on TV may not be actually true. But because that is my primary source of information, that is my primary source through which I get my information, I start to form my opinions based on which. That actually creates a pressure both on bureaucracy as well as political executive to start then taking decisions, making decisions which look more media friendly, people friendly, etc., even though the true story might be quite different to what it's being shown. So yes, it does have a significant influence, both positive as well as not so positive, because media also acts as a very positive pressure group. Similar is the case with social media. A lot of things which bureaucracy might not have cared about responding to, now they are very worried because a video might go viral. TV channels might start to play it out. People might make it viral on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So if somebody did not get a house, somebody did not get a ration card, somebody did not get any help which he was or she was supposed to get, then when the media starts to play it out, then the entire machinery gets after to respond to that situation. So yes, there's a positive side to it, but there's also a dark side to it, which I just mentioned.
Sir, now coming to the main question, and there are multiple questions relating to a single doubt. What was really the Hathras case that recently happened, and what was your take on that? Some people are saying that media asks very several questions from you, and you were silent on few of them, sir. So can you briefly explain all that?
See, so because the case is I'll give you a Babu type answer on this one. I'll have to, because of the boundary conditions of the event, because the event is still being investigated by CBI and it's sub judice, it's pending with the High Court and Supreme Court as well. All I can say, your role as a bureaucrat, for example, a lot of you might have seen me on TV in very different formats, or other bureaucrats. For example, you might have seen the SP, the district magistrate, and other bureaucrats doing their different jobs. What I have experienced and what I'm going to tell this forum, our job is not to get into this is how it should have been done. Our job is, once you know what the reality is, our job is to basically execute what is legally correct. It may not appeal to a section of the population, either because this is not how they like to see it, or because not, or it may also happen because they may not be even aware of what the reality is. They might be, they might be fed with information which might be biased. But you as a bureaucrat has to be emotionally stable, and you got to do what your job is. For example, now I'll specifically come to some of those actions you might have seen about me on TV dealing with the case. Is when Section 144 was imposed. Under Section 144, not more than 5 people are allowed to gather and enter any place, including a private space. So in the village in which this incident happened, when the district magistrate imposed Section 144, and the orders are very clear that not more than 5 people can be allowed and be allowed to gather, etc., etc. As a magistrate, your job is to comply with those orders. Whether the case is right or not, that is something for the investigators, the police, the IO, the CBI, etc., to find out. Your job is to ensure that Section 144 imposition is fully complied with. Then there was barricading right at the highway in the village, etc. Your job is also to communicate those decisions very clearly to the media. For example, during those days when the SIT was inside the village, the media was both off camera and on camera were fully briefed that because the SIT is inside the village, nobody is allowed, so that the investigation will not get unduly influenced. Makes perfect sense, right? To me, it did make perfect sense. If the special investigating team is basically doing its interrogation, why should the media or any unauthorized government official or a public representative or people from other villages be allowed inside the village? Do we not think that actually could lead to any undue influence, etc., etc.? To me, it made perfect sense. 144 is imposed till the SIT is okay. So when the SIT was not inside, the entire media was allowed. They were running through the fields, they were hiding here, they were lying on the floor, they were lying on the roads, in the bajris, in the bajre ke khet, blah, blah, whatever they wanted to do, nobody stopped them. Then the decision was very clearly communicated to them. 144 is imposed, the SIT is inside, nobody is allowed, including the government officials who are not posted at that site. Now, as responsible media, you should have said, fine, if that is the case, that is what we are going to tell people. That the administration has told us, because the SIT is inside, till the SIT basically is inside, we will not be allowed to get in. But instead of basically doing that, they started to play it out in a very different fashion. Now, as a bureaucrat, you get very excited about it. You could feel very frustrated with it. You could basically start to respond in ways and means which could actually further deteriorate the situation. But as a bureaucrat, your job is to be emotionally stable. And your job is not to respond to some of those provocative situations. For example, one of the videos which went absolutely viral was when one of the journalists was basically asking me questions and I was absolutely pin drop silent. है ना, बोलिए, कुछ बोलिए, मीना जी कुछ बोलिए, आप कुछ बोलते क्यों नहीं? This, that and all. I was very clear in my head. My job as the magistrate in place, Section 129, Section 128, Section 144 is absolutely crystal clear. When a magistrate is present at a place, he is in charge of the law and order situation. If the magistrate is not in the place, then the senior most police officer becomes in charge of the place. So, for example, if I am present at a place and a senior superintendent of the police is present, or even the DGP of the police is present, the in charge of the situation is me, not the DGP of the police, even though he's much, much higher and senior to me. So as the SDM of that place, it was my responsibility that I do not let people get excited, provoked, and let the situation deteriorate. So that's why there will be situations you basically need to respond. There will be situations you need to stay absolutely quiet because it's not going to serve any purpose. Now, the media knew exactly very well that why we are not allowed to enter the premises of the village during those 2 days. They still kept on asking the same question. आपको शाम को ही बता दिया गया था कि कल से एसआईटी अंदर जाएगी, किसी को अलाउ नहीं किया जाएगा. उसके बाद भी सुबह फिर वही क्वेश्चन, उसको फिर आपने ऑन रिकॉर्ड, ऑन स्क्रीन बता दिया, ऑन एयर टाइम बता दिया, फिर 2 मिनट बाद फिर वही क्वेश्चन. सो हाउ मेनी टाइम्स आर गोइंग टू कीप रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू द सेम बीटन डेड बुश? So then it was a static silence that we are not going to respond to all of this. These are all distractions. What they want is probably a higher TRP, and what they want one of us to say something which then they'll basically mold, fold, and propagate in ways and means you cannot even imagine. So I took a very cautious decision that I'm not going to respond to those provocations, and I'll not let anyone in my team respond to those provocations. And there's a clear barricading. I'm not going to let anybody violate Section 144 or that line of entry, no matter how high or mighty he or she might be. So you might have seen a few instances wherein we had to resort to mild use of force to ensure that that crowd gets dispersed so that they do not enter the village forcefully. Otherwise, that could have led to riots in the entire Western UP or the entire state of Uttar Pradesh. The situation is extremely volatile. But when the situation is volatile, that's when your skills get tested in real field. Otherwise, when the pressure starts to pile up on you, you might start to buckle down. Care, why the hell should I care? बाकी लोग भाग गए, मैं भी छुप जाता हूँ. जा रहे हैं तो जाने दो, मैं अपनी नौकरी दांव पे क्यों लगाऊं? But I think those are the times when you actually truly get tested. जो पढ़ के आते हो ना वहां पे वैसी किताब में दुनिया भर का, वो तभी पता चलता है. तो इसी वजह से हाथरस केस में क्या हुआ इसका तो मैं जवाब नहीं दे पाऊंगा, because that is something which hopefully CBI should bring out fairly soon. Why we behaved in that fashion is very simple. SDM gets involved in a situation only when a criminal situation starts to turn into a law and order situation. So a magistrate is not a part of criminal investigation, generally, unless the district magistrate orders him to be a part of criminal investigation. His responsibility is law and order. So I was not a part of how the initial matter was investigated. But once that criminal investigation situation has started to spiral into a law and order situation, then my role automatically kicks in. Because I am the subdivision magistrate, the entire responsibility of basically ensuring law and order falls on my shoulders. So then I responded to it. And then my responsibility was to ensure that something happened. Whether it happened or not, how it happened, that's still being investigated and under question. So we'll wait for the final report to come out. But the situation, for whatever reason, has spiraled to a phase wherein this could now actually become a major law and order situation, not only for the district, but for the entire state and maybe adjoining states, etc., etc. So I'm going to basically ensure. So that's when the law comes very handy. I'm going to ensure that the law gets complied in letter and spirit, no matter who thinks what. And that's what we did. That we are not going to let anybody in because 144 is in place, and we did not let even a fly get into the village during those 2 days. Even though everybody tried through different, यहाँ से घुस जाऊं, वहां से घुस जाऊं, ऐसे घुस जाऊं, इससे फोन करवा लूं, जबरदस्ती करवा लूं, मीडिया ग्लेयर में तो प्रेशर में आ ही जाएंगे, कैसे नहीं जाने देंगे. I am the member of parliament, I am the member of legislative assembly, I am from this political party, I am from that political party, I am officer of that rank. Manga, no matter who you are, I am the subdivision magistrate and I am not going to let you in. Plain and simple. You don't like it, get me changed, no problem. Get me transferred. And I think to me, it all worked out well. It all worked out well had we not basically taken that strict posture and have not stuck to the letter and spirit of the law. Situation could have been far worse than what it was. Just imagine caste fights started to play out in a state like Uttar Pradesh, which is anyways quite sensitive to caste and religion and all those equations. And then you got Delhi very close by, you got Haryana very close by, you got Rajasthan very close by, where you also have similar kind of caste equations. So we were very sure that no matter what, I mean, whoever going to come basically in the middle of delivering, discharging our jobs, we are not going to let him go or her scot free, including the media. आप मीडिया को कैसे रोक सकते हैं? हम मीडिया को बिल्कुल रोक सकते हैं. मैं ये एंकर वो एंकर, मैं आप जो भी होंगे, बट अब यहाँ का इंचार्ज तो मैं हूँ. And I am asking you, and I'm telling you, I'm not even asking you, I'm telling you, you will not cross this line. And we ensure that they did not cross that line. And जब ये खत्म हो गया, when things started to come out, or the other part of the story started to come out and all that, all those media people off camera thanked. Had you not taken this, this could have turned into another major riot in the state of Uttar Pradesh. So you join these services. You join these services for what? You join these services because it's almost like you join, let's say, in IAS or IPS or whatever service you join. Now, there is no more service hierarchy-wise which is beyond this. Now, if you joining these services, even if you are not able to take a posture, position and a clear take on it, then who else will? आप नहीं कर पाओगे तो कौन कर पाएगा? I mean, the Prime Minister is not going to come here. The President is not going to come here. भैया आप पढ़ लिख के बंद तो गए, अब जब टाइम आया तो show your wit and your courage. So that is how we manage Hathras. People may agree with it, people may disagree with it. बाहर बैठ के अखबार पढ़ के टीवी देख के ज्ञान देना हमेशा आसान होता है. मैं भी बहुत देता हूँ, जैसे भी दे रहा हूँ. But when you're in the middle of when you're middle of things, when it's almost like दोनों तरफ से चल रहा है and you have not slept for last 6 days और रात को 3 बजे आते हो, सुबह फिर 6 बजे पहुंच जाते हो क्योंकि कोई घुस ना पाए, कोई दंगा ना हो, आसपास कोई कास्ट बेस्ड पंचायत ना लग रही हो, कोई मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन पता चले, एक बुलेट फायर हो गई किसी एक ग्रुप की तरफ से, बस वहीं पे किल सारा खत्म हो जाना है. कोई नेता आ गया हो, कोई डरा के घुस जा रहा हो, फलाना ढिमका. So when you're in the middle of that, that's when you have to just stay very calm in your head. किसी की नहीं सुननी. मैं ये बोल रहा हूँ, मैं वो बोल रहा हूँ, मैं आपका ये करवा दूंगा, मैं आपका वो करवा दूंगा, कि भैया तुझे जो करवाना है करवा देना, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं. और एक हमारे सीनियर आईएएस ऑफिसर है, he used to be DM बनारस. I mean, he gave us a very good पुड़िया. Now he is officer on special duty, Chief Minister's office in UP. He said, when you basically get caught in a situation wherein you know कि करूंगा तो भी कार्रवाई हो जाएगी, नहीं करूंगा तो भी कार्रवाई हो जाएगी, तो जब कार्रवाई होनी ही है तो जाते आते वो कर जाओ तो सही है. एंड दिस वाज वन ऑफ द सिचुएशन. अगर इनको स्ट्रिक्टली नहीं डील किया तो दंगे होना निश्चित है ऑलमोस्ट, और अगर स्ट्रिक्टली डील किया तो उसके रिपरकशंस होंगे. तो कम से कम अगर कुछ कार्रवाई भी हुई तो जाते आते ये तो रहेगा कम से कम दंगे तो बचा लिए. बाकी चलो सस्पेंड हो गए, अटैच कर दिया, ट्रांसफर कर दिया, चार्ज वापस ले लिया, वो तो चलो 6 महीने बाद, साल महीने बाद आ जाएगा. लेकिन अगर दंगे हो गए, 10-20 लोग, 50 लोग मर गए, मैं अपने आप को कभी माफ नहीं कर पाऊंगा. सो दिस इज नॉट गोइंग टू हैपन अंडर माई वॉच. आई मीन भगवान तो हम लोग नहीं है, बट एटलीस्ट डू एवरीथिंग अंडर योर पावर टू ट्राई एंड अवॉइड दो सिचुएशन. सो हाथरस में दैट वाज अवर स्ट्रैटेजी. हाथरस में टेक्निकली क्या हुआ वो आपको पता लग जाएगा. हाथरस में एज ए ब्यूरोक्रेट ऑन ग्राउंड क्यों हमने वो डिसीजंस लिए, क्या थॉट प्रोसेस हमारा रहा उन डिसीजंस को, दैट इज व्हाट बेसिकली आई ट्राई टू शेयर. एंड इनका कोई सिंगल लाइन सोल्यूशन नहीं है. सिचुएशंस कीप इमर्जिंग. ये आ रहा है, कभी वो आ रहा है, कभी सिचुएशन होगी, यहाँ पे पंचायत हो गई, गांव को घेर लिया, आसपास के गांव वालों ने, उनको समझाना, इसको समझाना, फिर वहां से आप आए तो यहाँ पे 2000 की भीड़ इकट्ठा हो गई. दे आर ट्राइंग टू ब्रेक द बैरिकेड्स ओपन, स्टोन पेल्टिंग स्टार्ट. अब इसमें यू हैव टू टेक अ डिसीजन इन लाइक split second. I still remember when there were 2000 basically I think supporters. It was a combination of 2 different political parties, and you were basically very nicely requesting them that please come in a group of small groups of 5 people, and we are basically will escort you to the village. You can go and meet and spend the time you want to, and then we'll basically bring you back. But they chose to basically convert this into a show of strength in certain fashion. And it was one of those split-second decisions. When they started to push through the barricading, I knew clearly in my mind that if they managed to reach the village, the riots will start right then. And once the riots start, no matter how much force I have, and even if I call the army, the riots will not stop. Delhi mein dekha, it just went on for days and weeks and whatnot. Even though you had the entire army, RAW, IB, you name it at your disposal. I cannot let that happen. So you have to take those decisions split second. Now you cannot be trained for it. You cannot be given a module for it. Like in situation A, do this. Situation B, do this. Situation Z, do this. No. And then I took a decision. Some people appreciated the decision. A lot of people might not have appreciated the decision. But if I have to do that again, I'll exactly do the same. Because to me, that probably was the finest decision I could have taken under those circumstances, with everything so dynamic being playing around me. So I'm not very sure if actually I answered the question you wanted, or the answer you wanted to hear from me, because it's still being investigated, so I cannot divulge a lot of those details. But as a bureaucrat, I just gave you some tips around how you possibly might look at situations. When situation gets tough, go by the law. The situation gets complicated and you are like, shit, I don't know what I need to do. Go by the law, go by the book. Because baad mein kuch bhi hoga, at least you'll be very clear in your mind that I followed the law of the land. For this particular situation, it might have offended 30% of the people or 70% of the people, but this is what I did. This is what the book said. The book says not more than 5 people. The book says as SDM, you are in charge of the place. The book says the riot should not happen. And the book says if the crowd becomes unruly, it is the duty of the senior most magistrate present in the situation to order use of force. So, and that's what I did.
So you handled the situation very well, and you answered it very well. We are now able to understand everything about that case from your perspective, from the perspective of bureaucracy. Sir, I have this personal question. When that case was on, and like you were having so much of pressure, have you ever thought that my corporate job was far more better than this bureaucratic job?
Not at all. And I'm not lying here, honestly. See, I am one of those persons, and I think this is just a suggestion. Everybody got their own preference. To me, you should never basically consider that was better than this or this is better than that. This is what I have it in my hand. This is a choice which I made for myself. And if I'm not liking it, the doors are open. You can walk away. Like you walked away from the private sector job, you could walk away from an IAS as well. I mean, this is not a job which the government forced upon you. And before you joined the job, did you not know what kind of job you're getting into? And if you did not know what the job you're getting into, it means actually it's your fault. You did not do your homework. A lot of people get frustrated getting into services. अरे यार क्या सोच के आए थे, क्या निकला? तो भाई साहब पहले आपको नहीं पता था क्या करने जा रहे हो. So if I get posted as a soldier, I बोले अरे यार I get posted in Siachen and all those fancy places. I thought I'll be living a cozy job in Delhi. तो भाई साहब आपको नहीं पता था आप किस जॉब के लिए जा रहे हो. अगर मैं एसडीएम बन जाऊं, दंगे की सिचुएशन आ जाए और मैं बोलूं अरे बाप रे भगवान मैं क्या करूं, ये कहां फंस गया मैं. पहले अच्छा था, दुकान में बैठता था, सुबह 10 बजे खोलता था, 5 बजे बंद कर देता था, ये कहां गलती से मैं आ गया. तो भाई साहब एसडीएम बनने से पहले आपको पता था. यू रोट दैट एग्जाम, राइट? यू टुक दैट एग्जाम and you made that decision for yourself. You made that choice for yourself. So because you have made that choice for yourself, why to repent? In fact, to be honest, I felt very glad. In fact, I'll tell you this, just 30 seconds there. So my first posting was in a district called Basti, as I mentioned. And Basti is the largest tehsil in the entire country. It is a tehsil which has a population of about 13 lakhs, 11 thanas and 7 blocks. So the district of Hathras is slightly small or of the same size of that tehsil. And I was the SDM there for a full year. And that tehsil had its own humongous problems. And then I got posted in Hathras. So I used to think, यार वहां पे जाने के बाद यहाँ पे मैं हाथरस में तो करने के लिए बहुत कम कुछ दिखा रहे थे, small city. But when the Hathras incident happened and when all this was going through, then I was like, maybe this is why God has posted me in this place. because he needed somebody who could actually deal with the situation. And I'm not saying I dealt it in a good way or a bad way or a perfect way or a worse way. This is how I thought I should deal with it. This is how I responded to it. People may like it, not like it. So at no point, so coming back to your question, at no point ever I felt that corporate job was better than this. In fact, there was a sense of gratitude that thank you God, you gave me the opportunity to save maybe, I don't know how many lives, how many houses, how many families, how many children. You look at some of the riots which have happened in UP in last few years. So I'm not going to name any one of them, but go through their histories. Look at for how long they carried on. Look at how many people got killed. Look at how many families got separated. Look at the kind of divide they left between communities, between castes, between religions. So I had such a humongous sense of gratitude that, okay, I am facing the brunt of it, and eventually maybe I'll get suspended, I'll get a bad entry, I might be taken away from the field for a year, 2, 3, but I'll have this humongous satisfaction if I manage to stop these riots till the very end of it. Then I'll have this humongous satisfaction that I was chosen, that God chose me to basically deliver on a job which was not always very easy. So no, I did not have any regret at all. In fact, I should not say this, but I felt energized with the dynamics of the situation. And that's why my team also stood behind me. I mean, the entire police force, otherwise you will basically, I should not say, I mean, it's being recorded, but there are a lot of incidences like it happened in Rajasthan. When the IG was there, the police force ran away. There are a lot of instances wherein the force basically not always stays on the spot. But my force, my team, not even a single member ran away from the spot. They all stood by me. They all stood by the law. They all understand why we are doing what we are doing. I mean, we were not in a position to explain it explicitly to the outside world, but deep inside, we exactly knew what had happened, why we are doing what we are doing, and why we are doing it the way we are doing. So no, in fact, we felt very fortunate in a way. Even if the outcome was very different, अगर मैं suspend होके भी आज बैठा रहता, I would have said the same thing. Yeah, so that's my answer to your question.
You answered everything with really great confidence, and that can be seen by your work also. Sir, we are currently running out of time. So one last question I want to take that, sir, what reforms according to you that Indian bureaucracy needs right now?
Well, I think this is almost like a UPSC boring answer. But I'll still, because you asked the question, I need to, I'm obliged to basically answer that. I think the first one is basically the recruitment process of getting the higher bureaucracy is brilliant. UPSC system is absolutely brilliant, no doubt about it. I think the training structure needs to be reformed significantly. My take on it is, I have found based on 2 different academies and having spent almost a year getting trained, it may not be actually in sync with what the actual job requirement is. So I think that needs to change. Then the appraisal system needs to change to make it basically more performance oriented. Then I think a decision needs to be taken around specialization versus generalization, what kind of specialization, at what stage that specialization should kick in, for how long that should stay in, and all of that. I think we have been talking about it, but no decision has been taken on it yet. Then I think we need to talk about basically, mid-career trainings, etc. So, I mean, there are trainings which are basically organized mid-career and all of that, but majority of those trainings are more of just paper exercise. They do not really basically train you to cater to the real challenges which you face during your mid-career or afterwards. So training needs to be strengthened. And I think we need to have a better system, more transparent system, more dynamic system of getting specialized people in the system and out of the system. I think this concept of career bureaucracy needs to be diluted significantly. So you should not feel I have scored this. Let's say, for example, I was ranked 102, and let's say somebody could have been ranked 1. So एक एग्जाम में एक बार आपने कुछ लिख दिया, 4 लाइन एक्स्ट्रा लिख दी, आपके 2 नंबर ज्यादा आ गए, तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि 35 साल तक ओ माय गॉड बस अब हो गया काम, है ना? कम ऑन, इट डज नॉट मेक एनी सेंस, राइट? देयर इज दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ सिविल लिस्ट इन इंडियन ब्यूरोक्रेसी कि जो यूपीएससी के नंबर आ गए और आपकी जो ट्रेनिंग में नंबर आ गए, उस सिविल लिस्ट के हिसाब से जहां आपकी रैंक पड़ गई, प्रमोशन सब उसी के हिसाब से होंगे कि भाई साहब आपने मान लीजिए गणित में 2 नंबर एक्स्ट्रा ले आए, एथिक्स में आपका आधा नंबर एक्स्ट्रा आ गया, वो पेपर है, उसी पेपर को आप दोबारा, कितने सारे यूपीएससी वाले होते हैं, they actually clear through, they get really good ranks and they are not even able to clear pre for next 2-3 attempts, and all of a sudden then they become topper. So has the person changed? No, he's the same guy. उस साल वो सब्जेक्ट चल गया, उस साल उसके इंटरव्यू में तुक्का लग गया, उस साल उसके एथिक्स में कुछ 2 लाइन एक्स्ट्रा लिख दी. So how could an exam be basically an assessment of how you are going to perform for, let's say, next 35 years in your career? I mean, honestly, this is the first time I am very intrigued by it. कि आपके नंबर आ गए, आप तो रैंक 1 हो, अब आप जिंदगी में कुछ काम करो ना करो, आपको प्रमोशन सबसे पहले मिलेगा. भाई, why? To me, that is a huge hindrance. That is to me a huge hindrance. The bureaucracy is not still performance oriented, I would say, or the way the country needs it. It is basically either constrained by people's own interests as well as the political constraints. And as I explained, political constraints are not always illegitimate. Their dynamics, their landscape, expectation of people from political executive is such that they are actually forced to behave in certain fashions. And I think we need to respect that. And we also need to respect that at the end of the day, he's the guy who's going to go and ask for the votes, not me. So we need to be sensitive to those things. So yeah, training, deployment, tenure, specialization, appraisals, mid-career training, lateral entries. I think these are some of the things which I think are practical things which the Indian bureaucracy should start to implement. I mean, we have been talking about them for 2008, ARC second came, and it's been 12 years. What has changed in last 12 years in bureaucracy except the lateral entry part of 10 joint secretaries in the government of India? Nothing. वही चल रहा है.
Yes, sir.
So that's answer to the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You answered it very well, right again. And sir, in most difficult settings, besides capability, it entails openness, strong willpower, and pledge to put your bright future at risk. Those who appreciate their own efforts develop the attitude to accomplish the goal, certainly. And you proved it very right, sir. Sir, so with this note, we come to the end of this session. It was truly a very intuitive session. You explained the topic very, very well. So, honorable dignitaries, our dedicated team, respected Prem sir, and dear participant, I am Shiva Pamar on behalf of the society. I feel immense pleasure to inform the closing of this tremendous session. I thank Prem sir to spare this time from his busy schedule to grace the occasion with his extremely relevant and essential topic. I give a very reconciled regards to our esteemed principal ma'am, Dr. Rama ma'am, for always providing us opportunities to organize such mammoth events. I also want to pay thanks to my entire team for helping in hosting such event. My deep sense of appreciation and thanks to all the participants who chose to live with us and attending the webinar with great enthusiasm and made it a very successful event. Last but not the least, a very big thanks again, Prem sir, for taking time for encouraging us and enlightening us. We really hope that you will always keep our bureaucracy well checked and balanced with your right efficiency and effectiveness. With this note, I want to inform the closure of this wonderful session. Participants can follow us on our social media platforms, and they can also fill the feedback form. Thank you, Prem sir. Thank you all the participants. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good time.